And you know what? We don't do it often, but let's thank God for Pastor Justin tonight also. Amen. You may be seated. All right, let's go to In the News. You ready? Got your seatbelts on? All right, I got some illustrations tonight for you. Here you go. This one says, oh well, let me get back to where I am in Psalms and give you some of the charts so you can see about it. So we'll talk about the New World Order because obviously we are in it. And we'll show you what's going on. So there you go. You're going to see that picture a lot. You'll get tired of seeing it. I am already. Biden signs executive actions on climate change, and it says it's time to act. I'm quoting, in my view, we've already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. We can't wait any longer. We see it with our own eyes and we feel it. We know it in our bones and it's time to act, Biden said before signing the executive order in the White House State Dining Room. The executive action Wednesday direct the federal government to elevate climate change to a national security priority, conserve about 30% of all federal land and water by 2030, and suspend new leases on natural gas and oil development on federal lands and waters. The actions will also create a commission focused on environmental justice and green jobs. Direct federal agencies to rely on science, which I'm really kind of concerned about, in their rulemaking, and convene a climate summit of world leaders on Earth Day, April 22nd. Okay, here's the deal. I'm sick and tired of hearing about climate problems. So I'm going to do an illustration to show you once and for all how absolutely silly it is and how it's bogus. You ready for it? All right, so let's imagine that this little water that's in here is our atmosphere. Let's imagine that's there and it's clean. Let's say it's clean. And let's say that there are polluters that are polluting our atmosphere. I need a third hand here. So we know that they want us to clean everything up. Now, if we cleaned all of America up, made everything green like the Green New Deal, and we are totally green and clean, then America, which by the way is represented by this little glass, why? Because India has 1.34 billion people. That's India. China has 1.39 billion people. We have 253 million people. So if we cleaned everything up, we got a green planet, right? Not really. Let me tell you why. Let's imagine the red is pollution. Let's imagine that, again, this is India, and this is China. So we cleaned all of our part up, right? Everybody say right. Yep. There you go. There are no regulations in China or India. Your planet's still messed up. You can do everything. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say there's such a thing as climate problems and carbon emissions that are killing it, which, by the way, I don't really believe it is, but let's say that it is. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. So if we clean everything up, there's no regulatory commission for China, and there's none for India, and even if they were, they'd go against it all the time. You can't even breathe if you go down the streets of some of the streets of Tokyo. You can't even breathe. You got to wear a mask regardless of coronavirus, and India is worse. And so you can do everything you want, but we've been sold a bad bill of goods. You can do everything you want. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm not saying you shouldn't do things that are advantageous, but to go absolutely wild on it and tell us that we're going to clean the planet up is a tooth fairy dream. It ain't going to happen because they're still going to pollute it. How many of you find that? How many of you understand? That is your illustration for tonight on that one at least. What did I do with my, there you go. And I have another one for later on. So, and during the offering, if somebody would come and take these away, because I'm tired of looking at this pollution. All right, let's go a little bit further. Oh, let me tell you another thing about pollution. So we have all these people, all these pundits saying that we have to get green, got to be careful about fossil fuels, about burning it. Well, one of the things that I found out, and you may know it, is actually John Kerry received a climate award in Iceland and by the way, he is the climate czar right now under Biden, and he flew his personal jet there to get it. The president of Iceland asked him why he did that. He said, that's not right, you shouldn't have done that. And how many of you know you shouldn't have? So they say one thing and they do another. Like this guy. He's one of the biggest proponents of climate change. His name is Mark Zuckerberg. How many of you know who he is? President of Facebook. Here's his yacht, by the way. That's the Ulysses. That Ulysses yacht costs $200 million, and it burns 1,500 gallons of diesel per hour. Now, if you use 20 gallons a week, that means it'll take you 2 years in order for you to make the equivalent of his 1 hour on that yacht. and he's talking about climate change. I got a good idea. If you're going to talk about climate change, you do it first, especially if you are consuming most of the things and putting most of the carbon into the atmosphere. So it's a baloney. It's total baloney, and even if it were true, these guys don't follow it anyway. All right, let me give you another one. Here's something else that's coming on. This one should alarm you. Proposed a national database to track gun owners' every move. In a new bill that has been introduced in Congress, eventually if it becomes a law, the Second Amendment will still be in the United States Constitution, but for all practical purposes, the rights that it's supposed to guarantee will be dead and gone. H.R. 2127 would do what it would create a national firearms registration system that would literally be accessible by anyone. H.R. 127 establishes a federal firearms registration system that will be accessible by federal, state, and local governments, including the military, even the general public. Now listen to it well, because you don't want to miss what's going on here. The system will track the make, model, and serial number of all firearms, their owners, the dates they were acquired, and where they are being stored. So if your neighbor, a co-worker, or someone that just wanted to rob your home wanted to know how you were armed, all they would have to do is to be registered and look up your firearms registration online. Within 3 months, you would have to report to the government where you bought all of your guns, where they were purchased, and where they're currently being stored. Well, good luck with that. I'm sure you're not going to be able to do that. It's laughable. Needless to say, if the government knows where all your guns are being stored, it would make it much easier to grab them from you at some future date. H.R. 2127 would also require all gun owners to be federally licensed. That would mean that owning a gun would no longer be a right. Instead, it would be reduced to a privilege that the government could take away at any time they wanted to. According to the bill, the licensing procedure would include a psychological evaluation, so they can eliminate anyone, by the way, who they thought wasn't psychologically fit. Now, that sounds like they're going to get rid of the people that are crazy, but promise you, if they have a targeted group, they're going to find a reason. Again, the licensing requirement mandates that the licensed applicant undergoes a criminal background check and then submits to a psychological evaluation to determine whether the person is psychologically unsuited to possess a firearm. Successful licensees must show that they have insurance policy, which will cost another $800. Our government, listen, lawmakers must be smoking weed up there. They got to be doing something. They got to be hitting a bong or something. I don't know what they're doing. And it wouldn't just be you that would be getting interviewed. According to the bill, spouses and other family members would be interviewed also. For the psychological evaluation, a licensed psychologist will interview individual spouses and at least 2 other family members or associates to further determine the state of the mental, emotional, and relational stability of the individual in relation to firearms. Here's my other question with this, besides the fact that being unconstitutional. Where are they going to get the money to pay those psychologists? You know how many people own guns in America? You ready for it? 100 million Americans, 100, a third of us, own handguns. Another 100 million own rifles. How in the world are they going to do that? During the 2020 campaign, Joe Biden promised a long list of gun control regulations. There's a reason that Michael Bloomberg spent $125 million helping Biden in Florida and something over $600 million nationwide in the general election. Gun control is very high on the list of the things that Joe Biden wants to get accomplished during his next 4 years. And by the way, he's not accomplishing it. It's the left Democratic Party. Joe Biden's just a stuffed suit. He's a puppet. He's a hand puppet. And they're using him. They are coming for your Second Amendment, and they aren't going to stop until they get what they want. Millions of Americans can see what is happening to our society, and they are quite concerned. 2020 was a record year for gun sales in the United States, and dealers have reported demand is extremely strong so far in 2021 as well. The Democrats do not like this one bit, and they're going to do their very best to put a stop to it. An all-out attack on the Second Amendment is coming, but at this point, most people are not even aware that this is about to happen. So we're watching him sweep a lot of things through. This centralist that was supposed to be a moderate Democrat is absolutely not. He's not anything. He is being used by the extreme left, and they're going to push everything they possibly can push through in the next at least 2 years until either the Senate or the Congress changes. They're going to push everything they can. So I'm not surprised. I'm a little surprised at the speed of what they're doing it. Almost 60 executive orders in the first couple of weeks that he's been in office. It's ridiculous. Clinton had 2 in his first at this time of his presidency. Bush had 3. Obama only had 4, and so now he has close to 50. So you can see he's rushing it through as much as he possibly can. And this is one of them. Biden allows LGBT, Q, R, whatever, flags to be raised over U.S. embassies worldwide. The Biden administration proudly announced the commitment to public displays of gay pride as newly appointed Secretary of State Anthony Blinken lifted a ban on rainbow gay rights flags being displayed at U.S. embassies. Here's what Trump did. Trump said no flags other than the American flag can fly at an embassy because they were trying to fly all kinds of things. In 2019, the State Department rejected requests from U.S. embassies to fly a rainbow banner next to the American flag in honor of Gay Pride Month, which is in June. Vice President Pence defended the policy, calling it the right decision. When it comes to the American flagpole, the American embassies and capitals around the world, he said, one American flag flies, he told NBC News. And so Blinken, who was confirmed last Tuesday, also said the White House will appoint a special envoy for the human rights of LGBT persons, a position established under the Obama administration, but which remained unfulfilled by Trump. He never fulfilled the position. As justification for his proposed measures, Blinken claimed the attacks based on sexual orientation bias were on the rise. He says that people are getting accosted and there's more crime against people who have a different sexual orientation. Unfortunately, that's a lie. FBI statistics contradict the statement, showing that the gender identity hate crimes spiked in 2014 under Obama, and they dropped in 2017 after Trump was elected. Joseph Biden is the first, by the way, I'm going to give you my opinion, which you know I don't do often. He's the first Catholic, un-Catholic. He's the first united, ununited. He's the first for the people, against the people. He's the first centrist Democrat, leftist Democrat president we've ever had. In short, he's an oxymoron. And I'm going to emphasize the end part of that. Biden's order to export abortion worldwide. He's ramming all these things through. Look at it. With your tax dollars, if you ask most people about the Biden and Joe Biden in 1980, abortion radical is hardly a term that they'd use to describe him. But the man who used to walk in the March for Life, because he's a politician. He's anybody's dog that'll hunt him. So he was against abortion. He used to walk in the march against it. He wouldn't even recognize himself now, sitting behind a desk in the Oval Office, signing the death warrant of unborn children worldwide. Today, this evolution to the outer limits of his party were officially complete. By reopening America's wallets to abortion, his legacy as a moderate anything is permanently finished. It was billed as President Biden's health care day, but only on the illogical left could exporting abortion be considered a medical aid. The announcement, Dr. Susan Berry warns, is the clearest sign yet that he's abandoned his call for unity. As pollsters will tell you, outlawing overseas abortion funding is an area of near consensus for both parties. Both parties don't want to do it. They don't want to fund abortions worldwide. Only he does, and is left. 77% of Americans want to ban taxpayer-funded abortions abroad, including 55% of Democrats and 64% of pro-choicers. Only 19% share Joe Biden's new view that bankrolling the killing of foreign babies is good use of U.S. dollars. 7 out of 10 millennials and Generation Zers don't share the Democrats' radical opinion on taking of innocent life. Fewer than 2 out of 10 want unlimited abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, and another 6 in 10 want to see an end to Roe versus Wade. As for funding the barbaric procedure, their attitude is the same as the general public's. They don't want to do it. For Catholics who keep hearing the administration's use of Biden's faith as an excuse, the executive order was especially frustrating. Quote, I will just take the opportunity to remind all of you, Press Secretary Jen Psaki said a few days ago, that he is a devout Catholic and somebody who attends church regularly. I can bring my dog to church. That means absolutely nothing. Listen, give us a break. It's one thing to push for federally funded abortion and reinstate U.S. funding of abortions around the globe, despite the opposition of most Americans and most Democrats. But it's quite another thing to do so while gesturing at Biden's supposedly devout Catholic faith, as his baptism is a get-out-of-jail-free card for any policy decision he makes in contradiction to the church. Catholic League President Bill Donahue could only shake his head in disgust and say, here we have Biden, a so-called fellow Irish Catholic, whom I don't recognize at all. Quite frankly, he has nothing in common with any Irish Catholics that I know of, and I know millions of them. This is a disgrace of what's happening. That's a Catholic Democrat. Meanwhile, if the move was supposed to appease his radical base, it didn't. The far-left abortion activists were actually angry that he hadn't gone further. It's not enough was the headline at Salon, which is an abortion paper. Under President Trump, the government didn't just ban overseas abortion funding in the State Department. It brought almost $9 billion from the state health and human services and defense agencies to give to pro-life rules. So we're watching it. Even Planned Parenthood President Alexis McGill complained on Tuesday that it just won't be like flipping a switch. So Trump stopped all the funding to overseas abortion. Biden rewrote that this week and said, no, we're going to fund anybody out there that we funded before. And the liberal left is saying, oh, that's not enough. I'm telling you, it's never enough for them. Again, let me give you my opinion. This presidency is going to backfire, I promise you. It's going to backfire big time, and I mean that. Biden is a stuffed suit. He's a hand puppet who's not cognizant enough to know that he's being played like a monkey on an organ grinder scam. And basically, it's all going to crumble down. I promise you it's going to crumble down because it's just too much, too soon, and it's too far left, and that's not where our country is. Now, let me give you another one. This came out a while ago. This is an old October 2020 report. This is what it says. Watch, Joe Biden's probable dementia was on full display today. This is in October. And as I read this, I'm going to add something to it that I saw this week. And so it says this. It's clear that Joe Biden is showing signs of mental aging and dementia. His speech is garbled, his sentences diverge into asides without coherence, and his numbers and names are scrambled in laughable ways. He said, we have 120 million dead from COVID, he informed the Americans last month. Not right. This week, twice, and I heard it, twice he said that by the summer we'll be able to fully vaccinate 300 Americans. I couldn't believe I was listening to it. And he said, let me repeat myself. Now, let me remind you, he's reading from a teleprompter. But if you know anyone who has dementia, and it's not a laughable thing in this part, if you know anybody who has dementia, the way they give you a test is they show you a clock and they ask you to tell the numbers on the clock. If you can't do it, you have first signs of dementia. They actually ask you the date of the year, and if you can't do that, it's the signs of a dementia. And dementia patients cannot recognize numbers. It's the first thing. They can't recognize numbers. On a teleprompter, he can't read the numbers. That's a sign of dementia. Now, let me go on. It's not a product of age, it's just who he is, wrote Paul Waldman of the Washington Post last April. But Washington Post columnist Mary McGregory said in 1986 that Biden is much in demand as a star speaker, one guaranteed to rouse Democrats. So he's saying that he was very prolific back in 1986. A state congressman even proclaimed that Biden's campaign speech for the 1988 presidential primary was the finest political speech I ever heard. What they're saying now is that this is the way he's always been. No, it's not. It was also, of course, Biden was accused of plagiarizing a speech in 1987, word for word, by the way. Biden's once polished speeches have morphed into painful to get through, verbally confusing, and slurred diatribes. The total reversal strongly suggests that Biden's poor speaking abilities today are a product of aging rather than a lifetime of ineptitude. That's the reason why he doesn't answer any questions. That's the reason why he's in his basement. That's the reason why you'll never hear him do an interview, because he's not capable of doing it. Now watch. Wednesday, for instance, Biden spoke, this is back in October, spoke to voters this incoherent sentence, quote, Lonnie knows I believe this every fiber of my being. We're posed. What I propose is it can be done. I think we're in a position to really make it happen. Look, I guess I'm getting it. I guess I'm taking too much time, but you know. No, I don't know. But by the mid-2000s, Biden's speaking abilities already started to decline, largely driven by worse gaffes, but also characterized by clumsy speech. In 2008, the New York Times wrote, Senator Joseph Biden Jr., the Democratic vice presidential nominee, is an experienced, serious, and smart man, but he does say some curious things. Biden, at age 66 back then, had recently said he was running for president mixed up with army brigades with battalions, and referred to Sarah Palin as the lieutenant governor of Alaska, according to the New York Times. Worse, in 2007, Biden said of Barack Obama, I mean, you've got a first of sort of mainstream African-American who's articulate and bright and clean and nice-looking guy. In other words, like other blacks aren't. I mean, that's a storybook man. Biden's speaking abilities continue to decline over his tenure as vice president, leading former Speaker Paul Ryan to note at the 2012 vice presidential debate, I think the vice president very much knows that sometimes the words don't come out of his mouth the right way. Biden's eloquence has deteriorated in particular over the past year. When he began his campaign with a speech in Philadelphia in May 2019, he spoke assuredly for over half an hour, albeit strangely at times, and with simpler sentences. Now Biden gives shortened teleprompted speeches from his basement, where he often has jumbled speech. It's confused on basic questions and gives inappropriate remarks. The jumbled speech often leaves voters wondering what Biden means to convey. Speaking on the coronavirus for an interview with The View in March, Biden said, we have to take care of the cure. That will make the problem worse no matter what, no matter what. You know, it's funny, but it's sad. It really is sad. This man has dementia, and he's running your government. So listen, in an April ABC interview, Biden said, we have never let our democracy's sakes second fiddle, a way that we can both have a democracy and elections at the same time, correct the public health. That doesn't make any sense. CNBC interview in May from his basement, Biden said, I mean, we should be invested. We should become the net exporter of new technology by investing the $40 billion in the $400 billion I'm proposing in research and development for new ways to absorb carbon. Nobody absorbs carbon, by the way. And of course, there's his reading of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by Go, you know the thing. That thing is God, by the way. Even before being forced to Biden's basement, the campaign had transitioned to fewer appearances and shorter speeches in what many saw as an attempt to cut down on the gaffes. This strongly suggests that Biden's ability are not what they used to be. Now, this is before the election. Imagine what the American people are thinking when they elect someone like this. Worse than these verbal mistakes, towards the end of Biden's in-person campaign, he began lashing out at voters aggressively. Another sign of dementia. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier, Biden told a college student in February who said she had attended an Iowa caucus. More bizarrely, Biden had an aggressive verbal altercation with a Michigan factory worker who challenged him on his decision to have former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke lead his gun control efforts. You're full of blank, Biden told the factory worker in early March. A campaign worker attempted to stop the altercation, but Biden put his hand in front of the campaign worker's face and said, "Shut up," to her, and continued to give an impassioned response. And then Biden continued, wagging his finger in the worker's face. Wait. I will take away your AR-14s. He said before he would not take away any guns. The worker said, that's not okay, all right? While gesturing toward Biden's hand in his face to get it out. He said, don't try me, pal. But on the whole, Biden's campaign appearances have shown a man who has passed his prime. A June 29 Rasmussen report poll found that 38% of likely voters believe Biden is suffering from some form of dementia. 38% of voters, including 20% of Democrats. The reason they voted for Biden was because they hated Trump. It wasn't because he's qualified. He's not qualified. Additionally, the poll found 60% of young voters between the ages of 18 and 29 believe it's likely that Biden is suffering from dementia. 60% of them. The question is of whether or not Biden's cognitive abilities have sunk to the point that they would greatly hinder him in carrying out the duties of the office of the President of the United States. It's of great consequence. The holder of the office will have the role of leading the fight against the coronavirus, protecting our country from foreign adversaries, bringing us out of economic depression, and representing the United States on the world stage. Man, we're in trouble. Biden claimed in a press conference that he is constantly tested for cognitive decline. When asked to show the tests, no one ever showed them. Biden promised to do as much, show the tests last September, when he said he would publish his full medical history, according to The Hill. To date, Biden has only released some details of physical conduct in December of 2018. No materials have been released on his cognitive condition. I'm telling you, we're in worse situation than we thought. Well, you can be in Great Britain. Top Tory MPs horrified by government's plan to recruit children to spy on parents. So this is from the Boris Johnson administration's efforts to pass legislation which allowed the state to recruit children to spy on their parents and even break the law. While doing so was horrified some of the party's top parliamentarians. I won't read it all for you, but here's what they're doing. In order to catch your parents not observing COVID restrictions, you can report your parents as a child as young as 5 years old. That's a bill in the Parliament of England right now. And for doing that, you can actually get a reward. Can you imagine giving a 5-year-old reward for reporting your parents that they weren't strictly observing COVID-19 restrictions? It's absolutely unbelievable. UK police said this: it's your civic duty to inform on fellow Britons breaking lockdown. And so it's a big to-do back there. And a lot of people are going against it, thankfully. And I don't even know this guy. He's been banned. Cancel culture wants to drive conservatives from the public square. If the cancel culture thought they have a pushover in Mike Lindell, they were mistaken. The MyPillow founder has never lost any sleep over the left's attacks, and he doesn't plan to start now. When a handful of companies decided to drop the popular line over Mike's concerns over the 2020 election, he said he thinks there was some fraud that was going on. I'd like to see it investigated. He wasn't rattled. He even vowed to stand taller for any businesses who might be next. I'm going to have to read all of it. Let me tell you what he said. So he was in the Rose Garden. President Trump had invited him to the Rose Garden, and he led a prayer and talked about Jesus and gave a salvation message. Instantly, instantly, this is back when, a couple of months ago, instantly the media started to ban him. Instantly they started to, companies started to not carry his MyPillow. Matter of fact, the IRS got on him and said, we're taking down all your commercials because there's too many. I don't know when they've ever done that before. And then when he was seen with President Trump, everybody started to go against him. And then when he talked about being, wondering whether which is a no-no right now, wondering whether or not there was any fraud and asking for an investigation, which, by the way, you can do that. Somebody say amen. Well, all the companies started to throw him off. Bed Bath & Beyond, I think they're here somewhere. Bed Bath & Beyond took him off. Let me see if I can find out everyone that did it. There were several. Go ahead. Kohl's took him off, that's right. There's a couple of, somebody else? Walmart. The only one that let him stay on was Costco. And Costco said we're standing by him. You know what? I've never had a MyPillow. I think I'm going to buy 2 of them. I really do. He said his sales have gone up tremendously since they've done it. And basically said this, when they said that they took him off Twitter, they banned him from a whole bunch of things also. And he said people sit in a war room and what they do is they make complaints to Twitter about him. They're paid to make those complaints. It's not real people that are complaining about something. It's these people that are paid to do it. And so we're watching this anti-conservative move continue to grow steam in America. And I don't know, again, where it's going to stop. Let me tell you a little bit about Israel. You still with me tonight? All right. Israel's military chief warns of severe implications of return to Iran deal. Again, I won't read it, but I'll read a bit. When assessing the comments made over this week by Israeli Defense Force Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Aviv Koshai, who warned against the return to the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, it's useful to envision 2 red countdown clocks. The first countdown clock, the time left until Iran is able to break through to nuclear weapons productivity. The second clock measures currently an entirely unknown quantity, the time left until the Islamic regime in its current form might fall, or alternately experience a profound domestic political change. Now, what's he saying? He's saying this. If Biden goes back to help the Iran nuclear deal, which it looks like he's going to do that, and he lifts the sanctions, which, by the way, is crippling Iran. They can't do their nuclear testing. They can't do a whole lot of things. They don't have the money. So if he lifts the sanctions, which it looks like he's going to do, and Biden continues to support them and gives them more money, then they're going to do 2 things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to enrich the uranium that they've been spinning in centrifuges ever since 2010, and they're going to put them on a nuclear warhead. He says this. And then he says even if they do, the other thing is the politics in Iran is so unstable that place can fall any day, and that nuclear weapons and the buttons can be given over to someone who are terrorists. And so he's absolutely right. Let me remind you that Israel won't let that happen. The Mossad has already taken out a couple nuclear facilities. It's already taken out their top nuclear scientists. And the Mossad knows that the instability of that area is based on Iran. So does Saudi Arabia. It's one of the reasons why Saudi Arabia has gone into the Abraham Accords, because they know that Israel can protect them, because Israel is the sole nation that has nuclear bombs and nuclear weapons, and it's a deterrent to all the other nations. So if Biden does that, then I'm telling you, we're going to see a war in Israel, and we're going to see a war that's going to be not a small one. We're going to see a big one, which may be Psalm 83. This is another one that came out today. Dry bones live. Jewish growth in the West Bank to approach 1 million. So the West Bank is Samaria. It's anything past the 1967 borders, and basically Israel has flooded the area. They have almost 1 million people that have been there, that have come into there since 2015. What they're doing is they're populating the entire nation of Israel, and it's a prophecy. God said in the last days he will bring them all back, and they're coming in droves back to Israel. So again, another sign of the times. And this one's pretty interesting. It's not necessarily prophecy, but it's definitely biblical proof. Archaeological breakthrough. Royal purple fabric found from the time of King Solomon. So they've been digging in a spot called Timnah. Timnah is in the desert. The desert, arid regions of the desert, preserves everything. And what they found is they found royal robes made of purple. Now, that may not seem like a lot to you, but let me tell you this. Purple was the most expensive dye you can buy. Lydia was a seller of purple, if you remember in Acts. Why is it so expensive? Because they would take mollusks, which are shellfish, little clams, and they would open them up, and one little tiny piece of that they would use, and they needed thousands of them to get a batch of purple dye. And so only royalty found it. So if you find purple, an old purple garment in Israel, and by the way, because it's preserved, it's lasted 3,000 years. The DNA testing says it's 3,000 years old, which means this was a robe either of David or King Solomon, which proves they lived. So it's pretty amazing what we're seeing happen in Israel. Let me give you a couple more. This one is from Under War. North Korea, that is a strange nation. Very strange. It's very, very persecuting of Christians. Kim Jong-un is a type of Antichrist, not the Antichrist. He's a type. The Bible says you'll have many Antichrists, and we do. He's one of them. Will North Korea start an arms race? So North Korean leader Kim Jong-un recently boasted of deploying hypersonic missiles, spy satellites, multi-warhead intercontinental ballistic missiles, and the North's own nuclear-powered submarine. Now what they do is when they have a parade, they parade all of their weapons down in front of Kim Jong-un, just like Russia does. And basically, they are nuclear capable, which is kind of scary. So is South Korea. Now, North Korea became nuclear capable because Russia gave them the technology. South Korea became nuclear capable because we gave them the technology. It's a chess game, so that they wouldn't destroy each other. Now, South Korea knows that which is a democratic republic. They know now that they have to beef up. So we're looking at North Korea starting to do an escalation in the arms race. There's going to be a lot more testing, probably some nuclear testing. And again, it's going to bring world tension. So we're watching wars and rumors of wars that Jesus told us of escalate. Let me go a little bit further. How many of you know we're in the last days? All right. Incredible growth of Christianity in China has government leaders warned. Christianity is absolutely taking off in China. Let me give you a fact. Every time you persecute Christians or a Christian church, the Christian church explodes in growth. Every single time. It's like stepping on a fire and all the little sparks go everywhere and start other fires. There are more Christians, born-again Christians in China than there are communist people of the Communist Party. And the Communist Party, Xi Jinping, is getting really, really worried. What he's done, this article says, is he's starting to make government churches. So to be a government church, you have to be registered, and then they put cameras all over the churches to see who's coming in and who's going out. And they take away your Bible and they replace your Bible with a communist version of the Bible. They take down pictures of Jesus and they put Xi Jinping up instead. Now the church, which has made the church go underground. So you don't hear about the Chinese Christian church because it's underground. If you hear about a church in China and somebody's supporting it and they have a building and it's out in public, don't support it. It's a government-funded church. The real church is underground. And basically what's happening is they're starting to put the screws even more on that. What did Jesus say in Matthew 24? Persecution would happen. It's happening. Now, we haven't been persecuted to blood yet, but persecution is happening all over the world. A 60% rise in killings of Christians since last year, I told you. A 60% rise all over the world. So we're watching the end time events just blossom, go out of control as we see that we're approaching the last of days. Let me give you a couple more. Are you still with me? Biden, again, fundamentally transforming America. Joe Biden insisted that his administration will look like America. A week and a half in, the majority would agree nothing this White House has done even comes close to resembling their values. Instead, it's been a 2-week parade of far-left extremism that snuffed out any hope that this president's whole soul is actually in bringing America together. He's not going to bring us together. What is in, as far as the Washington Post can tell, is an LGBT agenda that will blow the doors off of modern convention. Already, the Post insists Biden, the most pro-transgender president in history. Within hours, he'd thrown down the gauntlet on the military, schools, federal agencies, and other workplaces with a legitimate reason to respect the biological sexes. The president has made it clear that he intends to weaponize the law to crush dissent. Alliance Defending Freedom's Kristen Wagner said solemnly. That impacts not just people of faith, but all Americans who want to live life according to their convictions. The government should not be allowed to single out or punish people who hold a different view. Somebody say amen to that. They shouldn't be able to punish us because we have a different view. That's what it means to be an American. It says this, the LGBT dogma lives loudly in Biden. The new president will stop at nothing to usher in an era where he desires of the 4.4%, the desires of the 0.4% are elevated above the other 99.6% in national security, education, privacy, competition, corporate autonomy, healthcare, and freedom, and usually at the expense of proven science. Just look at Biden's new policy on transgenderism in the military. Study reams of paper, actual data, to arrive at the conclusion that encouraging gender dysphoria is dangerous in the military. Poured over the 20 months or so of experience between the Obama policy took effect when the report and recommendations were issued, resulting in some interesting contrasts. The Pentagon study notes that medical costs for service members with transgender dysphoria have increased nearly 4 times to 400% compared to service members without gender dysphoria. They're also 8 times more likely to attempt suicide, 9 times more likely to have mental health encounters. Listen, the government does not want to spend money on the people it's training to defend it. And that's what's happening. And so, like so much of the left's equality agenda, this non-discriminatory policy discriminates in favor of transgender identified service members. Other people with mutilated genitalia are not permitted to even serve in the military, nor are the dependents on lifelong specialized medical treatments like hormones, nor are those with serious mental health conditions. Only transgender people. It's not military effectiveness that motivates the Biden policy, it's political correctness, pure and simple. And so I'm not going to read you this one. I'm going to show you the picture. Because it's too gross to read. This is not normal. The booming transgender accessory industry shows us why. So basically, we now have an industry, a cottage industry that's growing to provide clothing for children who are transgender. What that means, it's clothing to hide their genitalia. And basically, it's from swimsuits all the way down the line. It's absolutely disgusting. I can't even read this to you. And this is not the America that I grew up in. It's not the America you grew up in or your fathers went to war for. So I want to tell you it's not normal. I'm not going to read it because it's disgusting, and I'm going to say it. It's demonic, and I said it, demonic, and they can do whatever they want with me, but it's demonic. Let me give you this one. I will read. Moral decay. The British broadcasting company, BBC, has come under fire for a program aimed at prepubescent children, which claim that there are over 100 gender identities. Yeah, you heard me right. 100. You know, I'm so glad I didn't know that in high school. What a bummer it would have been knowing which one of the 100 gender types to ask to the prom. 100 different gender types. This is absolutely ridiculous. It's going way, way out of line. And you know what? People are drinking the Kool-Aid. They're believing it. Now, there's some backlash to this, but not much. It's pretty amazing. Something is really, really happening pretty fast in England. The film was widely criticized with conservative MP Jackie Doyle Price, saying telling children there are more than 100 genders is nonsense and potentially harmful as it risks normalizing something which is extremely rare. London mayoral candidate David Curtin also took aim at the BBC, writing, "The BBC should not be teaching kids unscientific nonsense about gender queer theory. There are 2 sexes, not 100. Defund the BBC." In response to the outrage, the BBC said over 50 teachers were consulted in crafting the messaging of the film. So I say, fire those 50 teachers. Let me give you a little bit more. We go to the planet, and then I have one more after that. So let me give you this one. India's bird flu epidemic. That's right. There's another virus coming. In addition to struggling against COVID-19, India is facing 2 different strains of bird flu. And by the way, they're deadly. The nation has culled thousands of birds and warned citizens that the flu can spread through the human-to-human contact, though the highest risk comes from contact with poultry. Jesus talked about pestilence. That's what these are. They're pestilences. We shouldn't be surprised this is happening. In reaction to these new viruses, the prices of chicken, eggs, and other fowl plunged, and many shops and stores that sell such food were closed down, and restaurants were forbidden to serve chicken or eggs. Bird flu outbreaks have also spread to 10 European nations so far, Japan and Korea. Bird flu diagnosed in at least 10 European countries, one of the articles says. Avian flus are yet another plague affecting nations around the globe, and at least one of these bird flu strains, H5N1, is deadly to humans. We appear to be entering a time where the risk of pandemic is absolutely increasing. Bible prophecy reveals that many devastating events will erupt in the world right before Jesus comes back, and man, that's the key here, including disease epidemics. It's Matthew chapter 24, verse 7. And lastly, I'm going to give you this last one. With the tables turned, Christians who voted for Biden have some hard questions to answer. For the last 4 years, those of us who voted for Donald Trump and who identified as committed followers of Jesus have been asked increasingly and incessantly, how could you vote for him? If you truly believe in what is written in Scripture, how could you vote for a man like Trump? Now the tables are turned, and that same question must be asked of those who identify as committed followers of Christ and who voted for Joe Biden. How could you do it? Did you not see the radical, destructive, anti-Christian policy decisions that he would make? As for the justification of our vote for Trump, our argument has been simple. We agreed that Trump's character and personality could be negative and destructive, but we hoped that the good policy decisions he would make, and he did make, decisions of massive life and death proportions, would outweigh his character flaws. And so, when it came to fighting against the slaughter of the unborn, numbering more than 60 million to date in America since 1773, Trump was our clear choice over Hillary Clinton or Biden. Jesus cares about the least of these, which most certainly includes the defenseless babies in the womb. When it came to preserving our religious liberties and our freedoms of conscience and speech, Trump was our clear, hands-down winner. When it came to standing up to radical Islam or facing down tyrannical China, Trump was our definite preference. One of my colleagues in the Middle East recently told me how the bloodbath, which took more than 650,000 lives during the Obama administration, virtually stopped dead when Donald Trump was elected president. My friend recounted to me the horrific torture and abuse of women in his region at the hands of Islamic extremists, including their repeated gang rapes. And worse, in his mind, Trump was a champion who helped put a stop to such horrors. A Chinese immigrant to Australia told me earlier last year that he was terribly afraid of President Xi and saw Trump as a hero, especially as Trump stood with the Hong Kong protesters. These are spiritual, moral, and humanitarian issues of great importance to us as evangelicals. And so we appreciate Trump's courageous stands. Needless to say, the same Israelis who felt betrayed by the Obama administration were profoundly grateful to Trump for canceling the Iranian nuclear accords, knowing the real dangers of that terrible deal. In the end, did he do more harm than good? No, he did more good than harm. But for those Christians who voted for Biden, were you not aware that he would be the most aggressively pro-abortion president in our history, with an even more radical vice president by his side? Are you surprised that he has not only invalidated the Mexico City policy, which, by the way, is funding non-government organizations for abortion, NGOs, but has also revoked the Hyde Amendment? The Hyde Amendment is basically to the federal government supporting abortions, all by executive orders. If you consider yourself pro-life, can you look at me in the eye and say, I'm glad I helped empower President Biden make these life-destroying decisions? Can you say, I'm glad every American taxpayer will be forced to fund abortion with the help of my vote? Are you surprised that Biden signed into law a radical transgender bill that has even caused consternation among gay, feminist, and transgender leaders and individuals? Do you feel good about the fact that by voting for him, you have negatively impacted women and girls throughout the country, as well as strengthened big tech's crackdown on our freedoms? Are you surprised that there is already great concern within Israel that Biden might derail the amazing peace process made by Trump administration? Were you aware that he might well give back to terrorist Iran a potential path to nuclear armament? And can you really applaud his powerful call to unity in his inauguration speech when his executive actions on his first day in office were so highly divisive and even destructive? But just as I welcome those who question my vote for Trump, I urge every Christian who voted for Biden to welcome my questions now. Do you not hear us when we warned about his radical leftist agenda, only a portion of which was highlighted here? And if you didn't know there were his plans, can you really justify your vote? So here's my totally unsolicited and perhaps unwanted advice. If you voted for Biden, how about a little less self-righteousness posturing towards those of us who voted for Donald Trump? How about all of us acknowledging that the hope for America will not be found in elected officials, but in the gospel, not just preached, but lived out? Great article. That's in the news for tonight. I'm going to ask you to stand for a moment.